It has been 15 years since President Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act. The controversial law keeps same-sex couples from receiving federal marriage benefits and allows states to ignore same-sex marriages that may be sanctioned by other states. But now there's a big push to repeal the act that's gotten very little attention. Today's Undercovered story looks ahead to tomorrow's possible vote by the Senate Judiciary Committee. Richard Socarides, Equality Matters president and former Clinton senior advisor, joins us now to discuss this. So, Richard, the vote could preview what will happen if the bill reaches the Senate floor. What outcome are you expecting?
Well, I'm not sure it will happen tomorrow, but at some point in the near future, we think the Senate Judiciary Committee will vote out of committee with a positive recommendation to the full Senate to repeal this bill that would repeal the Defense of Marriage Act. We're not quite as optimistic that we'll get a full Senate vote on it this year, and we're actually quite pessimistic about its chances in the House. But having said that, this markup tomorrow is an important milestone in a process which will hopefully lead us to repeal of this legislation.
And why has it taken so long, and what could stop it?
Well, you know, these things take a while. It took us a long time to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We worked on it for many years. Long after we knew it was broken, it took Congress many years after that. You know, typically, sometimes Congress works more slowly than public opinion. But I think that, what we see in this country now is an increasing majority of Americans who support the basic freedom to marry for all loving and committed couples. And Congress, like it sometimes do, is just catching up with that.
There are so many lawsuits that I've been reading about, which is part of why this caught our attention, that really are making a statement. I mean, do you think that individual states and individual lawsuits could overturn DOMA even before the federal government gets it?
Well, that's an excellent point and a very good question. I do believe that the courts, as often happens in issues like rights, equal rights, civil rights, as we saw in the African American civil rights movement, I think that the courts are moving faster than the Congress, and it is more likely that this law will be declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, perhaps in 2 or 3 years. And that will happen sooner than I think the actual congressional repeal. You never know because these things are moving so quickly. We saw this summer in New York where many people were surprised when our state legislature here in New York moved as quickly as they did. And that has been an extremely welcome development. As Governor Cuomo has said, people are thrilled that New York joined the states that recognize every loving and committed couple's right to marry.
As we mentioned, you advised President Clinton, who ended up signing the Defense of Marriage Act in 1996. If you were advising President Obama today, what would you tell him about this?
Well, President Obama has already done a lot to advance the cause of basic fairness for gay and lesbian Americans. And he supports this legislation. His Justice Department has taken some important steps in providing a much fairer, much more reasonable context in which the courts are hearing these cases. So I would advise him to keep it up. I think that when President Clinton signed this bill, unfortunately, in no state could you be married. And this was a Republican ploy right at the beginning of the 1996 re-election campaign. So, I think he regrets signing it, and he has announced himself that he supports the right of all Americans to have equal marriage rights. So I think President Obama, has really done a lot already. It's interesting, as we start to focus on the upcoming election, that all the Republican candidates support taking away the limited rights that gay and lesbian Americans already have. Many support going back to Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Yeah, it is. So it's going to be interesting come election time, certainly, where the votes will come from. Richard Socarides, president of Equality Matters. Richard, thank you for giving this issue some time with us.
Thanks, Randy.